Got it. Welcome all. So good to see each and every one of you today. It was a busy day today. I'm Don Bryant. I work with a couple groups, but today I joined the Cleveland Palestine advocacy community at Max Miller, our congressional representative, who's pro-genocide, and we stood out there in front of his. We couldn't go in because this was for veterans only. So we stood outside with a nice sign that said, "Your bombs for Israel, killing women and children." So then next was Pride today. I spoke with Poor People's Campaign. I'm on the coordinating committee for Poor People's Campaign. And yes, and next up, the other organization I deal with is Cleveland Peace Action. Thank you very much. I'm the new president there for about a year, sort of new. Any case, thank you so much, George, for putting this together, and all the organizers. So I would like to introduce two speakers that we're bringing on from Cleveland, Greater Cleveland. And first is Faten Odeh. I've known Sister Faten since about maybe 10 years on the protest line. She's Palestinian American, and she's now executive director at the Council on American Islamic Relations, Cleveland office. And after Faten presents, I would ask Mona Ashraf to speak. And again, met Mona recently, since October 2023, on the protest line. And the first action we did together was go visit our senator's office. And she spoke about homeland and justice to the senator. But darn it, they don't listen. So we'll start out.
I want to let you know
Thank you.
that you got 8 minutes to speak. And when you have 2 minutes left, I will give you the 2-minute warning. So look out for me turning my camera on and giving you 2 minutes so you can wrap up.
Okay. Faten will be discussing Gaza on the ground and what justice looks like for Palestinians, what Palestinian justice looks like. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Don, and thank you everyone for inviting me here today. Again, my name is Faten Odeh, and I am the executive director of the Cleveland and Northern Ohio chapter of CARE Ohio, the Council on American Islamic Relations. I'm also Palestinian. I was born in the United States. I was born in Florida, but my roots are Palestinian. My parents live in Palestine. They live in the West Bank, and my husband's mom still lives there too. You know, what we are witnessing is just probably I used to be a history teacher. So, I taught a lot about the terrible things that are in our histories, but I think this is probably one of the worst things I have ever. It's one of the worst things compared to a lot of the things that we have taught in history. And I think part of the reason is that we are watching it happen instead of just reading about it years later, right? And so we're witnessing all of this going on right now. And it's so heartbreaking to see what's going on and not be able to put an end to it, right? So I am going to talk a little bit about what's going on in Gaza. As I'm sure many of you all know what's going on. I hope that I can contribute some new information, or maybe just information you already know. We can just talk about it. I don't really have like a presentation prepared. I'm just going to discuss some things, and then I will also talk about how it's even affected people here, because the work that I do at CARE allows me to receive information about how people are affected at work and their schools because of what happened on October 7th. And then I'll talk about what Palestinian justice looks like. And so I'll just begin. As we know that, this did not begin on October 7th. We all know that, right? Palestine has been occupied since 1948. Gaza in particular, I don't have the years exactly, but I remember I was in high school when the settlers withdrew from Gaza, and then we know that there was like a big blockade. It became an open air prison for the Palestinians there, and it was deemed inhabitable years ago, right? And ever since then, we've seen constant bombing of Gaza, and where the civilian population has nowhere to go, right? And then it's just, if we thought it wasn't going to get worse than that, it did get worse, right? And the situation on the ground is that it changes so rapidly. It's changing, and it's not changing rapidly for the better, it's changing rapidly for the worst, right? We know that tens of thousands of civilians have been murdered by Israel within the last few months. This is a fact. No matter how many times people are trying to say, oh, well, it's not really this number, it's actually a lower number, whatever the number is, because I haven't known anyone to come back to life. I'm just going to say that. Okay. So whatever the number is, one civilian is too many civilians. And so we know for a fact, tens of thousands of civilians have been murdered. And we know many of those civilians have been children. We know that chemical warfare has been done to civilians. I've seen videos, I'm sure many of you have seen this, where children are shaking uncontrollably, or they feel like their skin is burning, and it's just terrible. And we know that this is real. We know that humanitarian aid is not being allowed in. We know that the healthcare system has pretty much collapsed. We know that hospitals and schools and all these have been targeted and bombed. One of the, I forget what the name is. I'm sure somebody here can tell me, but it was a long-standing hospital, and it was, I mean, the images that came out of it were horrifying. Where we have corpses, right, of patients who were murdered, and their hands were tied together. There's evidence of them being buried alive, and torture, even to the point where they've even switched the clothes of the people that they have killed, so that their loved ones can't identify them by their clothing, right? We know that more than 100,000 Palestinian civilians have been killed or severely injured. Tens of thousands of children have been made orphans. Tens of thousands of children have been martyred. And for the ones that remain, right, that are still living, for the rest of their lives, they will suffer severe trauma. Severe trauma. And we also know that there is a manufactured famine going on. Thank you for the warning. And Gaza has been declared the deadliest place on earth for civilians and aid workers. And even declared safe zones are not safe. The situation has gotten so bad that a new acronym had to be created, WCNSF, Wounded Child No Surviving Family. This is what this has created. And I'll talk a little bit about how this affected the people here. We are, people are advocating for the United States to stop funding this genocide. And their jobs have been, sacrificed, their education. We know that students haven't been able to walk on graduation. Their degrees are being withheld because they cannot stand any longer for their universities and for their government to fund this murder and this ethnic cleansing. And on top of that, it's not just happening in Gaza, it's also happening in the West Bank. Just the other day, the place where my dad gets groceries, where he gets his produce, was set on fire by the Israeli occupational forces. So nowhere is safe. And there's no Hamas in the West Bank. There's none. And so what Palestinian justice looks like is for the Israeli government and occupational military forces to be held accountable to the fullest extent of international law, for the international community to stand up against this inhumanity and stop doing business with the entity called Israel, and for the Palestinian right of return to be granted, and for all of us to live with peace and dignity. And I don't think we're asking for much.
Mhm.
I don't think, and I wanted to say this, and I say this every time I speak about Palestine, my father is older than Israel.
Mm,
So thank you. Thank you for
right
your,
on.
appreciate it. And I hope I gave you
Thank you,
something to
Fenton.
think about.
Hmm.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I know it's difficult and we've been going through this for far too long. So our government's got to move, and that's what we're about, because they're messed up. Or
Yeah.
we got to shut it down, which is what we do, right?
Mhm.
Y'all, shut it down. Next up, I would ask Sister Mona to speak on Islamic views on justice, peace and war, and whatever else comes in that realm. Thank you,
Thank
Mona.
you, John. So my name is Mira. I am also a Palestinian American. I am with the Palestinian Youth Movement and CPAC. I'll be talking about peace in Islam, justice, and war. Just Don, can you enable the PowerPoint sharing?
George, could you enable that screen share for her?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Hmm. Okay. Mm, okay. I'm working on it. Here you are. Yes. Make you a co-host. You can share now your screen.
It says it's still disabled.
You sure?
Yeah.
Huh. Okay, I'll try again. Make co-host. Yes.
There you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So first gonna cover justice. So justice in Quran, it's been mentioned so many times, and it just demands the people, the Muslims, to just always be with the oppressed and stand up against the oppression, what no matter what
Be here by 6
circumstances it
o'clock.
is. Whether it's their family, it's their kin, it's your neighbor or even yourself, you're always supposed to stand with the oppressed and uh, defend those people. So justice has been mentioned so many times in Quran. So we believe that Allah would be the judge. So one of his names is Al-Hakim, which means that he's the judge upon everybody. So he will be the one to kind of give this justice for everybody. And there are many verses that talk about just justice in Islam. I can't read all of them just because of time. But here's some examples. So surely Allah does not do any injustice to men, but they are unjust to themselves. And there are many more. So Allah would be very good with judgment on the day of judgment. Even he mentioned like to the way of an atom. So nothing really gets missed on the day of judgment with Allah. Uh, so before Islam came, there was Arabs were in really a state of in ignorance, and they were just loyal to their families, to their community, to their like parents, their kin. So Allah has came down with this ayah, and He said to really just stand up with whoever was oppressed, no matter if it was you, if it was your parent, yourself, whether they're rich or poor. It's just you should just follow the right thing when doing justice. There are much more examples of justice in Quran. It's been talking about a lot, and it's just really promoting peace and kind of equality for justice in Islam. However, so Islam has talked about like how in the first ayah, the first verse, how if two believers were in fight together, how Allah would tell you to kind of solve this with all fairness. Then he talked talked about in another example, the orphan's wealth, how to protect it when the orphan has a wealth in when they would be able to kind of get it. So nobody can like take their wealth away from them just because they're orphan. Um, and in the third verse, it's basically talking about how you don't have to kind of just give up everything, your rights, for like to be kind type of thing. So Allah said like a life for a life, an eye for an eye, a nose for a nose, ear for an ear, and it continues. So you don't have to kind of give up your rights for justice to happen, or like for a way of charity, but you're not just supposed to go over whatever they hurt you with. So you can kind of uh not like you kind of can um have your how would I say that? Kind of have the judge, so you can um kind of work with them on whatever to get your rights back, but don't just go over too much. And of course, you can always forgive them. It's really up to you. So peace in Islam. So first of all, Islam has been there's many verses talking about peace between different religions, and Allah just said like that we're uh supposed to kind of invite other people to teach them about Islam and everything, but if they don't accept the Islam, then you just live together peacefully. So you just kind of tell them about your morals, tell them what Islam is about, and if they don't want to go to Islam, you don't have to fight them for it or anything. So there's a verse from Quran. It says the truth is from your Lord. So whoever wills, let them believe, and whoever wills, let them disbelieve. And it's just between that person and God. At the end of the day. So there was a message for non-Muslims, also in the Quran. For you, it's your religion, and for me, it's my religion. So it's really just building the kind of tolerance and patience toward other faiths, and just kind of living together peacefully if they don't want to go into Islam. So it's all about like non-violence, and Allah has talked so many times in the Quran about how Allah like this is a home of peace. Everybody should go like on the straight path, and kind of even if your enemies desire peace, you should welcome it. So if they incline towards peace, then incline towards it, and put your trust in Allah. He's the hearer and the knower. So this is like a verse from Quran. So kind of always just have a good kind of intention and think in a good way of what people are thinking, and just have that kind of trust in God, and um, lean more towards peace, of course, with reserving your rights. And it also promotes forgiveness. So um, even if like in very limited cases, if they don't want to kind of um, if something happened like a bad situation, and you just decide to forgive this person instead of kind of taking revenge or anything else, Allah would reward you for it at the end of the day. So whether it's in like current life or later on, after the day of judgment, afterlife, you would be rewarded for whatever you forgive for. So war in Islam. So there is four kind of permits for jihad in Islam. So jihad is basically like kind of fighting, just like how military would go. And there's also other types of jihad, like just kind of doing like, for example, going to another country to study or do something good. That's also considered jihad. So a lot of people just have the misconception of it from like the media and everything. But for defensive jihad, there is like 4 conditions where it's kind of permitted in Islam. So if there's an occurrence of aggression, so it's kind of you're just defending yourself. And there's like verses from the Quran that came from it. And Allah and fight in the cause of Allah those who fight you, but don't commit aggression. Allah does not love the aggressors. So it's kind of you just are protecting yourself versus just going in war with other countries for no reason or for colonization type of thing.
Thank you. Thanks so much. You are out of time.
Okay.
Do you need another minute?
Yeah, I'll just conclude.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's like these 4 principles of jihad, and the most important thing is just adhering to human principles. So, for example, in one of the uh previous kind of battles in Islam, they got the opportunity to cut or poison water, and the Prophet just said to not do that. So it's kind of forbidden to do whatever bad acts even during war times. So you have to not kind of burn trees or crops, and you're not supposed to hurt women, children, or elderly, or scold anyone. Just kind of just having the good thoughts.
Great.
That's all.
Thank you. Don, do you have anything you want to say?
Thank you, Mona. I think we'll just move on to the next.
Okay.
The
So
next
that
slide.
means Sally.
I'm unmuted. George has asked me to present the peace and justice type Jews in America. And what that I hope is me, I'm included in that, and otherwise she wouldn't ask me. And I'm also a member of the United for Peace and Justice UFPJ Coordinating Committee. You know, trying to represent even part of Jewry, the Jewish world, even part of it in America, is to use a Yiddish word. It's a lot of chutzpah, because we Jews are we're proud that we always discuss everything down, you know, completely, and and it gets to be almost an obsession. So but I do think there is one thing I can say about Jews in general in America, that the existence of Israel is, you know, our heart. And when we see the government of Israel and the IDF acting as has already been outlined on this particular webinar already, we hardly know what to do. And as was alluded to, this is not just now. Unfortunately, I'll put in the chat the name of a rabbi who, an older rabbi, very, very old now, who wrote a book about healing Israel-Palestine. And as far as I'm concerned, his book is just as relevant now as before. And my conclusion after reading this book, and I read it, I've read it 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times, including recently, is that what we have on our hands And as a rabbi, he talked to Arabs, Palestinians, Arab people in every country he could find. And he tried to be as even-handed as he could be, even though, of course, he's a trained in Judaism. And his conclusion was that these are two victim peoples, the Palestinians being victimized. I'm afraid he thinks by not being as supported by other Arabs as it should have always been. The Palestinians, as far as I know, and as Rabbi Lerner taught me, and other people since then, the Palestinians are a very cultured and intelligent people. And why they should have been shunned, at least in the opinion of Michael Lerner, perhaps the other speakers will say something to what I'm just saying. I guess I don't really quite understand it. So let me go on about my assigned topic. I cannot tell you, the Jews that I know, how full of sorrow, anguish. We can hardly believe that what I would call revenge for October 7th is going on. Now, I must also remind everyone that on October 7th, Hamas came across and they did such atrocities. And by and you know, war often brings out terrible ironies. So I think we know that the particular villages that were just across the border from Gaza and where Hamas struck, many of the people that lived in those places were what I guess sometimes we call them good Jews, that they were helping Gaza people come to appointments, medical appointments in Israel. That Hamas didn't stop to find out who it was that they were murdering. That they were actually murdering people that were on the side of the Palestinians. So, so then you have to look at Hamas. And I know that I'm going to say something controversial, but I have to. I see Hamas as evil. And I certainly differentiate Hamas from the bulk of the Palestinian people. But to be plotting, making tunnels, to now keeping hostages of people that happened to be in their way on October 7th. And is in a way just as bad as what Israel is doing. It's like, that's where Michael Lerner still speaks to me, that there's a crazy balance between these two peoples, that they have come almost to act like each other in a way. And that's certainly not all the Palestinian people. I'm talking about Hamas. So there's always a hardened kind of core fringe group. We know that from the United States politics right now, that somehow becomes more dominant and more listened to. And It
You have
throws,
30
it
seconds,
throws, it
Sally.
throws me off when George is saying 2 minutes. So
Actually, it's 30
but-
seconds.
but it's
It's
what?
30 seconds.
Okay, my second speaker has not shown up. So I'll try to say a little bit of what Tamar Fields was going to say too. My 30 seconds that belongs to me, let me say something about anti-Semitism. I certainly think that anyone speaking against the present constituency of Israel, its prime minister, I'm afraid the majority of its Knesset, I'm afraid the majority of its cabinet, for people to speak against what Israel is doing as a kind of revenge for October 7th. I see that people should certainly not think that that is anti-Semitism. I speak against those things. So let me just say a little bit. Tamar Fields was going to come on the call. I don't know, I've come off the call twice to try to reach her and haven't, so something must have happened in her own life. She's a wonderful woman. I actually know her personally. And there is an organization to me that is so hopeful in Israel. This organization is called Standing Together, and it started in Israel by what I would call righteous Jews. And I'm going to try, if I'm not too good at putting things in the chat while I'm trying to listen, but the points that the mission statement, let's say, of Standing Together is so remarkably like, I think the peace-minded people that are on this particular call now, and that there is a voice like this coming out of Israel, and now it has a very few chapters here in the United States. And when you see the mission statement, even if it has to come out later when we get the recording of this call, I think you will see that this is a hopeful thing, that people that are ashamed, I guess you would say, Israeli Jews who are ashamed of their own government, haven't stopped there. They've gotten together and they've tried to say what should be happening, what almost realistically could be happening if people would just look deeply into what is the right way to work with other people. So I'll just stop there. If any of you want to take one note today, write down the word Standing Together and Google it later. And I think you'll find, like I do, that it is a beautiful expression coming out of Jews in Israel. There's always been peace now. There's always been a lot of good organizing in Israel. But this is the newest one. It's trying to speak to the current situation.
Thanks, Sally. So I'll turn it over to Charles.
Hi, everyone. I am Charles with Chicago Area Peace Action, and we are going to touch on some legislative aspects. And we have with us today Robert Naiman, who has been a long-time activist engaged with Just Foreign Policy and Truth Out and other organizations. And so, Robert, are you ready?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I don't know if people can see me okay, if that matters. I happen to be in a place where there's a window behind me. So,
You're
Is that
coming
okay?
through.
alrighty. Here today on behalf of the Chicago Area Peace Action and its Foreign Policy Working Group, and as Charles mentioned, I was policy director of Just Foreign Policy from 2006 to 2019, during which time, uh, starting in 2015, 2016, we were particularly focused on ending unconstitutional U.S. participation in the Saudi war in Yemen. I mentioned that because in terms of congressional work, it's a highly relevant precedent. There are many, many unfortunate parallels between what the U.S. helped Saudi Arabia do to Yemen and what the U.S. is now helping Israel do to Gaza and before, in terms of the blockade, in terms of deliberate famine, in terms of violations of international law, violations of U.S. law. Let me mention that at the direction of the Foreign Policy Working Group getting this assignment, I checked in with Hassan Al-Tayeb, who's the Middle East person at the Friends Committee on National Legislation, to compare notes preparation for this call. And we agreed that the top two legislative things, there's lots of things going on, as many of you know, things that people hope to do. But in terms of things that would move the needle, we strongly feel that the top thing is forcing Congress to vote. And mostly that has not happened since October, with the exceptions of voting on the supplemental and the 502B resolution introduced by Senator Sanders in December that was voted in January. And the best opportunities that we have now to force votes in the House would be a Gaza War Powers resolution. And this ask has been put, so for those who don't know, the key thing about the War Powers Resolution of 1973 provides a mechanism for forcing a vote on a war that Congress has never authorized. We set the precedent on Yemen. There are people who many in Washington, who try to say that the U.S. is not involved in a war unless there are U.S. boots on the ground, troops on the ground, or U.S. trigger pullers. But in the War Powers Resolution of 1973, in Section 8C, it defines U.S. participation to include any U.S. participation in the command or control of foreign forces or the movement of foreign forces on their way to combat. We set the precedent on Yemen of enforcing this for the first time against the Pentagon refueling of Saudi warplanes that were bombing Yemen in the middle of their bombing runs. That's clearly covered by Section 8C. It's participation in the movement of foreign forces on their way to combat, and Congress had never authorized that. In the present case, we know from press reporting in the Wall Street Journal and CNN that the U.S. is providing intelligence that Israel has used to target airstrikes in Gaza. Congress never authorized that. So any member of the House or Senate call the question on that anytime by introducing a Gaza War Powers resolution. And in particular, we've argued to congressional Democrats that you should enforce this on Rafah, because President Biden said, as you all know, this is a red line, and the UN and the humanitarian aid groups bleated him back and said, don't invade Rafah, because there are 1 million people sheltering there that you told to leave northern Gaza. And moreover, it's the hub of the whole humanitarian operation. Biden said this was a red line. And as you all know, Israel went into Rafah anyway. So under the War Powers Resolution of 1973, any member of the House or Senate could call the question on this. And particularly in the House, it's the only tool we have for forcing a vote. If there's an asymmetry in the law, the Senate has different tools. It has War Powers Resolution like the House, but it also has Arms Control Export Act. It also has Section 502B of the Foreign Assistance Act. There's different ways in the Senate to force a vote. In the House, we have one way of forcing a vote. So we're asking progressive members of Congress, progressive Democrats in Congress, to introduce a Gaza War Powers Resolution, and we urge everyone to ask your own members. The most likely members to do it are the 37 who voted against the, as I call it, the genocide supplemental, who voted against the supplemental to send even more money for more weapons. So that's our main idea in the House, and that we ask you to support and help us push on. In the Senate, we think the most likely way to force a vote is another Section 502B resolution. And we think it's plausible that Senator Sanders would do that, and it's plausible that others would join him, particularly in the wake not only of the current catastrophe, but also what just happened with National Security Memorandum 20. As many of you know, will recall, Senator Van Hollen used the supplemental consideration in the Senate. He had an amendment trying to enforce U.S. law, and he negotiated a deal with the Biden administration that Biden would put out an executive order on enforcing U.S. law on U.S. military transfers, not just to Israel. So, for example, as many of you know, under the Foreign Assistance Act, U.S. military aid should be cut off to any country that cuts off, that obstructs U.S. humanitarian aid. And as many or all of you know, this has happened in the present case. Israel has been obstructing, the Israeli government is obstructing U.S. and other humanitarian aid. So U.S. military aid should have been cut off, should be cut off, simply on enforcing U.S. law. Biden administration has not done that, even though Democrats in the House and the Senate urge them to do that, including one point Nancy Pelosi even signed a letter urging that. Under the Biden administration, the State Department did this report that they were required to do on compliance with NSM 20. This just come out, and as many of you probably saw, more State Department officials resigned as a result of this report being basically censored, including a woman who had worked on the report, 20-year veteran in the State Department, resigned in protest, not just of the policy, but of the fact that the State Department subject area experts were overridden by the political people in this report that was saying, oh, we don't have any evidence that Israel is obstructing humanitarian aid, when in fact, we have lots of evidence that's in the public record aid groups. So in this juncture, it would make sense to have another 502B resolution in the Senate, particularly focused on obstruction of U.S. aid. And the hope would be in January, when the vote happened, there were 11 or 12, depending on your count, 11 people voted. Brian Schatz missed the vote, but he put out a statement in support. If we could get another 502B resolution that's Senate, we could force another vote and put pressure on like the next tier of people, people like Durbin, Murphy, and Kane, who voted against us in January, even though they've been fairly vocal. Durbin was the first one to call for ceasefire. All of them signed the November demand for a cessation of hostilities. So the realistic hope would be that we could push the next group of people to vote yes. And what a 502B resolution does, and it hadn't been invoked in decades to force the vote before Bernie did it in January. The Section 502B of the Foreign Assistance Act allows any senator to introduce a privilege resolution forcing a vote on a human rights report, on a State Department human rights report. If the State Department doesn't produce it, then all U.S. military aid is cut off. State Department does produce it, that sets up a second vote where the Senate can prohibit anything that they want, anything they have the votes to prohibit. So this is our ask to you. This is our ask to everybody, is to push on your representatives and senators, particularly people who did anything good in the past, and say, look, you know, the Biden administration's not complying with the law, and we need more pressure. You need to be forcing votes. That's a vehicle for activists then to specifically pressure their representatives and senators. And there's nothing like a vote. They can't dodge a vote like they can dodge other things. There's a letter, they can say, oh, we missed the letter, blah, blah, blah. They can't dodge a vote. And that's the thing also that gets the most press, activist attention is a vote. So that's our pitch to you. Help us force a vote in the House and the Senate. In the House, we want a Gaza War Powers resolution. In the Senate, we want a 502B resolution.
Thanks so much.
Yes, Stacy Gilbert is the woman who just resigned, and I'm reading off the chat. And there was also a guy in USAID who just resigned.
We want to take any questions or comments that people have. You can raise your hand, literally, or you can use the raise hand function, and I will recognize you. So who would like to ask a question or make a comment? There are people writing in the chat.
There is somebody saying
I'm
in the
not so
chat
great.
that-
I'm not so
Oh.
great at seeing the chat. Raise your hand, either, raise your hand or use the raise hand function.
you have one, Michael.
Really? I
I
don't
think
see,
Michael Wall.
I don't see any hands.
Michael Walls, did you?
No, I didn't have my hand raised.
Thank you. Anyone? Oh, Catherine. Catherine Bunton? Yes, go ahead, Catherine. And keep your
Hi.
comments to 2 minutes, and I will mute
I'd like
you
to
at 2
ask,
minutes.
I'd like to ask Robert Naiman, could you create a one sheet on these asks with just enough background? There are people we can get to make calls, but we have to give them, a bit of a script. We have to give them just a little bit of info, and what you went through is great. And if I could have that on a handout, I can get people to make calls.
Yes, I assume that you have, if I give this to Catherine, I see Kathy Jones in the chat said something similar. Who should I give this to in order to distribute it to all the people?
To Charles.
To Charles, okay.
Thank you, Robert.
I can send it out when I send out the recording, Robert, if I have it in time.
Okay, what's my deadline?
Well, that would be tomorrow. I will send this recording out sometime
What
tomorrow.
time tomorrow? Okay,
Noon, 2. Is that good?
Thank you, everybody.
I don't
2.
wanna- 2, okay. That's fine.
Chicago time?
George, did you want me to move us into breakouts?
Yes. Oh my goodness, I was talking and my mute was on. But yes, we're gonna move into breakouts. And
But-
your task during the
Just a second,
breakout,
one,
I see you, Sally. I'll get to you. Your task
but
during
what-
the breakout is to discuss next steps, to discuss action
when
that
we
we can
see
take
Kathy
to
Jones'
support
name come
or
that
go
does-
on.
that doesn't mean that she wants to talk.
Pardon me, Sally?
Kathy Jones not wanted,
I don't see Kathy Jones' name hand up. I don't see a hand. So there aren't more comments.
don't know how to do this hand. Did Kathy,
Oh, I
Jones?
see a person named Kathy Jones. Kathy, did you want to say something?
No, not right now. Thank you.
Okay, you can say in your
same was with-
breakout group.
Excuse me, but the same was with Michael Waltz. Did Michael Waltz want to say something?
You just calling folks out, Sally Dan. Okay,
Okay, so I just want to point out there's plenty of dissension in the chat, so I think everyone should be reading it. And,
absolutely.
And
And please make
we
sure you
will-
make the
we will
point
send it out.
in your
so-
small group.
Okay.
Okay. All right. See you when you come back in about 20 minutes. Wow. I haven't seen that much about Flora for a long time.
George, I am in a break room. My thing still says join, but it doesn't go off my screen.
Yeah, do you want to join a group?
Yeah, I pushed on it, but it won't take me in. I keep
I
pushing.
will.
Well,
I can assign you.
oh, wait a minute.
Okay. Ernie, did you want to be in a small group? I can put you in one. And you too, Michael. Let's see. Okay. All right. Wow. Let's see. Okay. And Michael. Oh, he's assigned. Hmm. Hmm. So you chose to not be in a group, Michael?